Good morning, beautiful world. All right, Amazon. Give us a flash briefing.
From the New York Times. The police boxed in racial justice demonstrators in 2020, an anti-protest practice known as kettling, then hit them with batons and pepper spray.
Flash briefing.
Jamie, here's your flash briefing this morning.
Thank you.
In NPR News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Trevor Coleman. A bipartisan group of senators is introducing new legislation today that would require railroads to follow new federal safety regulations. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports the bill is in response to the massive train derailment and chemical spill that devastated the small community of East Palestine, Ohio, last month.
The legislation contains a number of provisions that would enhance safety procedures to help prevent future accidents, including new regulations for trains carrying hazardous materials. Rail operators would also be required to give advance notice to state officials about what their trains are carrying. The train derailment in East Palestine has renewed calls for reforms to the rail industry, with many lawmakers calling on the CEO of Norfolk Southern to testify about what went wrong.
NPR's Windsor Johnston reported. President Biden has just nominated Julie Su as the next labor secretary. She's currently serving as the deputy in the agency. Su formerly headed California's Labor Department. Federal aviation authorities are investigating another near collision between airplanes. On Monday night at Boston's Logan Airport, a JetBlue pilot took evasive action to avoid hitting a Learjet taking off on an intersecting runway. NPR's David Schaefer reports it is the fifth such near collision between planes in the last several weeks.
The FAA says that an air traffic controller told a Learjet pilot to line up and wait on one runway Monday evening while a JetBlue plane landed on an intersecting runway. The FAA statement says that the Learjet pilot repeated the instructions clearly, but then began a takeoff roll instead of waiting. The JetBlue pilot took evasive action and initiated a climb out as the Learjet crossed the intersection. The JetBlue flight later landed safely. Since mid-January, there have been 4 other similar runway near collisions, raising significant safety concerns that will likely figure prominently in a Senate hearing Wednesday for President Biden's nominee to head the FAA, Bill Washington. David Schaefer, NPR News.
Stocks opened higher this morning despite a strong economic rebound in China. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained about 20 points in early trading.
Chinese factories are picking up steam since the government relaxed its strict anti-COVID policies late last year. New numbers show China's manufacturing activity grew at the fastest pace in more than a decade last month. The Shanghai Stock Index rose 1%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index jumped more than 4%. Eli Lilly's promising to cut prices on popular insulin products later this year by 70%. The drug maker is also pledging to cap patients' out-of-pocket cost immediately at $35 a month. The federal government had already imposed a $35 cap for insulin users covered under the Medicare program. Drug makers are under pressure to address soaring prescription costs, especially for products that have long since lost patent protection. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down 2 points. This is NPR. Greece's transportation minister has resigned after a deadly and horrific train crash. A freight train and a passenger train collided head-on at top speed overnight, killing at least 36 people. Scores of others have been injured. It's unclear why the trains were on a single track. Authorities have arrested a station master. A 2-day meeting of foreign ministers from the group of 20 major economies kicks off today in India's capital, New Delhi. India would like to steer the agenda toward economic issues that are important to developing countries. But NPR's Lauren Frayer reports officials acknowledge the war in Ukraine may dominate talks.
India's Foreign Secretary Vinod Kwatra says Russia and Ukraine will be, quote, an important point of discussion. But he says he hopes that food, energy, and fertilizer security will also get due focus. Prices of those have skyrocketed because of the Ukraine war, and developing countries are suffering the most. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are both expected to attend. There's a group dinner tonight and talks tomorrow. U.S. and Russian officials have both walked out of previous G20 meetings when the Ukraine war came up. Host country India has maintained ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin and wants to steer this agenda toward the economic impact the war has had on developing countries. Lauren Frayer,
America, he said,
a major winter storm is still pummeling the West. Blizzard conditions are still posted for some of California's eastern mountains. And winter storm
Yeah,
warnings
screw
are
that.
up from Arizona into New Mexico. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News, from Washington.
Sometimes politics can feel like just a lot of noise, but the decisions made by leaders in this country affect you. Stay on top of how changing policies, breaking news, and new rulings affect your
I don't
life
understand why
every
they're
weekday
supporting
on the NPR Politics Podcast.
a Nazi
Listen now.
regime.
Listen to this podcast
Corrupt
sponsor-free
Nazi
on Amazon Music with a Prime
won't ever make me
membership or any
understand that.
podcast app by subscribing to NPR News Now Plus at plus.npr.org.
When it started,
That's plus.npr.org.
yes, it was a bad thing.
In NASA news,
Citizens getting hurt.
NASA has awarded a contract to Analytical Mechanics
Well, citizens
Associates of
have had
Hampton,
adequate time
Virginia, for
to get
services
them
to
the hell out
support
of there
NASA Langley Research
already.
Center's research, engineering,
Now,
and science
It's
services,
just building up to the
RSES.
Nazi regime. Period.
NASA's SpaceX Crew 5 will answer media questions at 12:30 p.m. EST Wednesday, March 1st, about their time aboard the International Space Station. The event takes place prior to their return to Earth later this month.
And they want us
NASA
to
Administrator Bill
send our
Nelson
own
announced
sons and
Monday
daughters
Dr.
to die
Nicola
for such a
Fox will
thing?
serve as the Associate Administrator for the agency's
No.
Science Mission Directorate at
We do not
NASA
support the
headquarters
Nazi
in
regime.
Washington, effective immediately.
We'll boycott the feds.
NASA has selected
Send
Jacobs
them no
Technology
federal tax money.
Incorporated of Tullahoma, Tennessee,
Just pay
to
your
manage
space
launch
tax.
infrastructure and to operate and maintain ground systems required for flight spacecraft processing at the agency's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA and Blue Origin's Club for the Future will co-host multiple free in-person viewing events of the agency's documentary, The Color of Space, at historically black colleges and universities, conferences, festivals, and more nationwide. The documentary is a conversation between 7 current and former black astronauts,
When they ask
each
why
of
you don't
whom were
send federal
selected
tax money,
in
you
weather.
don't support Ukraine.
Right now in Seattle, it's 32 degrees Fahrenheit with mostly cloudy skies.
War in
Today's
Ukraine.
forecast has intermittent clouds with a high of 45 degrees and a low of 38 degrees.
And since that's where all the
From
money's
NASA.
going,
NASA has awarded a contract to
There's no
Analytical Mechanics Associates of Hampton, Virginia, for services to support NASA Langley Research Center's research, engineering, and science services, RSES. NASA's SpaceX Crew 5 will answer media questions at 12:30 p.m. EST Wednesday, March 1st, about their time aboard the International Space Station. The event takes place prior to their return to Earth later this month. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson announced Monday Dr. Nicola Fox will serve as the Associate Administrator for the agency's Science Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters in Washington, effective immediately. NASA has selected Jacobs Technology Incorporated of Tullahoma, Tennessee, to manage launch infrastructure and to operate and maintain ground systems required for flight spacecraft processing at the agency's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA and Blue Origin's Club for the Future will co-host multiple free in-person viewing events of the agency's documentary, The Color of Space, at historically black colleges and universities, conferences, festivals, and more nationwide. The documentary is a conversation between 7 current and former black astronauts, each of whom were selected. That's all for your flash briefing.
all right, thanks. I feel briefly flat. Amazon, tell us a joke.
What are baby pickles made from? Cucumbers.
Baby pickles are made from cucumbers? Cucumbers? Oh, they're so cute. You know? All right. Have a good day.